Hey Adam, just coming back to your inquiry. You're doing pretty well in terms of speed. We use Pingdom generally as our speed test tool of choice. It is the closest to the real world speed you'll get, and so that's why we use it effectively. Our goal really is nothing to do with performance grades. Our goal is to get the load time under 1 second. So once it's under 1 second, that's typically where the site load begins to feel instant. It has that real snappy feel to it. So once we're under 1 second, we're doing pretty well. So there's really two things we're looking at when we're looking at this speed test. We're looking at the location, or three things: location, the load time, and the page size. So on this particular test I've done here of the home page, tested it from North America and Washington, so on the East Coast, and you're getting 700 milliseconds, 726 millisecond load, so really nice and fast. And the page is only half a meg in size, 515K. So it's really light, it's loading really fast, so that's good. When we do the speed test, we generally want to ideally test all the different page templates. So for your type of site, you'll have the home page as one type of page, and then the blog post page. So you're getting something similar. Let me just load this one up. So I took one of your blog posts and ran it through. So again, similar sort of things, 740 millisecond load time, and it's a bit bigger. You'd expect those inner pages to be a bit bigger with images on them, so 640K. So still really, really fast. So that's in the US, so it's nice and snappy. Really, there's no, from a losing, there's really two reasons why you want to look at speed. One is for Google to make it happy, and the other is for customers, for conversions, engagement, all that sort of thing. So at this speed, you're not going to lose anything, and you're not going to really gain that much by speeding it up. We're probably not going to gain anything tangible by speeding it up in the US. So in terms of buying a speed fix service to speed it up in the US, you probably wouldn't see a return. Now that's the US. If we look internationally, you're serving, I'm guessing your traffic is international. Typically we see, this is very common, so we'll see a half-second to 1 second slowdown, or we see the site load half-second to 1 second slower anytime the traffic has to go over an ocean. So you'll see here we've tested it from London, so it's 1.36 seconds. So you're seeing about 600, 700 milliseconds slower internationally, and that's to be expected because the traffic has to travel further. And the thing that's really making the difference here is the time to first byte. So we've gone from over here, it'll be very fast at whatever this is, 280 milliseconds. Here we've got a lot slower at 700 milliseconds. So that's really where it's slow. It's that distance it has to travel to talk to the server, ask it for the HTML file, and get a response. So that's really where the bulk of your slowdown is happening because of that international factor. So there are things we can do to speed this up. On our business speed fix service, we have something called edge caching that we enable using Cloudflare. So effectively we store the HTML file on the Cloudflare server. So the first time someone in London loads up the site, it'll have to go and grab it off the server. But the second time, or the next person that loads it up who is in London or the UK, the HTML file will actually load off Cloudflare. So this 700 milliseconds would actually be somewhere between 100 to 200 milliseconds. And actually this in the US would probably be between 100 and 200 milliseconds. So it'll speed it up a little bit there too. And that's because there's multiple Cloudflare locations in the US. The traffic doesn't have to travel as far. So there's servers on the East Coast and West Coast. So if I'm not sure where you're hosted right now, but if it's hosted on the East Coast, then someone on the West Coast of the US loads it up. That's still quite a distance to travel to grab it off the server. So with that edge caching in place, it will be pulling it off the local Cloudflare server, which will be physically much closer. Now there's a few other things that are slow here. So typically when we look at this waterfall view, we generally ignore these recommendations that Pingdom pumps out because they're kind of useless. Some of them don't even make sense, or they're old, or don't really relate to speed anymore. When we're looking at this, this is the waterfall view, it's called, and anything that's wide in here, so wider or slower. So we're looking for anything that really stands out as wide. You can see here that everything's loading quite fast. Things are loading off the server in 30 milliseconds. So there's no problems there in terms of speed. If we scroll down, we've got a few things that are starting to slow down. So you see here there's some drip code for your drip email marketing. Now when we look at site speed, we kind of break it into two. We look at the core elements on the website. So those are everything that's loading out of WordPress or WordPress generated. So that's basically anything that's loading off the hosting. We have pretty much total control over that. So we can change things, fiddle things, optimize things. And then we look at third-party stuff that's loading off third-party servers. So that's email marketing stuff, remarketing, analytics code, that sort of thing. So typically that's going to be a lot slower and we have much less control over it versus the stuff that's loading out of our WordPress directly. So you can see here that the drip code is a little bit slower. It's not hugely slow. At 100 milliseconds, it's not a big deal. But we do see ActiveCampaign in particular is really slow. We use ActiveCampaign and it takes about half a second to load the code. There's no real way around that other than, well, there's two ways you can minimize the effect. One is to put the code further down the page, so put it at the bottom of the page, embed it in the footer. The other thing we often do is we use Google Tag Manager. We use that to embed the code, but we add a delay into it. So we add typically a 5-second delay into the code. So what happens is the site loads, it's nice and fast, and then the user is active for at least 5 seconds, and then that code loads in the background. So it's kind of effectively lazy loading that code. But I wouldn't sweat this drip code. It's not a big deal. It's only showing as quite fat because the site is loading really fast. So these are a little bit exaggerated. Now, there's two things that are running slow. You can see these AJAX calls are taking nearly a second to load, 600 milliseconds. So effectively what the AJAX is doing, it is JavaScript that is processing, talking to the server and asking for information and then getting a response. So AJAX can be quite, the source of slow AJAX calls like this or AJAX queries can be quite difficult to pin down. So there's really the quickest way to troubleshoot those. We use the inspector tool. So I'm in Google Chrome here. I'm using the inspector tool. So I'm just going to filter. I'm on the network view here. So you can see here I've just filtered by just use the keyword AJAX, and that gives us our two AJAX queries. And we can see here, I'll just go to timing. You can see here I'm in Australia, so it's going to be much slower for me. So you can see here it's taking 2 seconds. 1 second and 2 seconds for this to run. You can see the time here, 2 seconds and then 1 second here. Whereas over here in the US, it's obviously much faster at 670 milliseconds or so because you're hosted in the US. So if possible, we want to eliminate these. So the two things, so this one is your Uso Plus plugin. So this is your related posts plugin. So it's probably talking back to the server to get data about the related posts. Now this one isn't as heavy as the other one. It's still taking 1 second to do its thing. So I would look at if you really well, it really depends on how serious you are about speed optimization. If you want to squeeze every last drop out of speed, I would look at a different related post plugin that doesn't have big AJAX calls like that, or I'd just get rid of it. So those would be the two options there: get a faster plugin or remove the plugin. Now this other AJAX call, AJAX can, as I said, these AJAX calls can be difficult to troubleshoot because you have to find the source of them. So usually when we're troubleshooting them, we'll go to headers and we'll look at what it's doing. So this is the data here. Sometimes it's easy to work it out, sometimes it's not. It's not super obvious what's going on here, but we've done some quick Googling and we've discovered that this is your author box plugin that shows the author box, this author box here on the site. So this is pretty heavy to be loading on every single page. So that's a where are we timing? So that's 2 seconds of an AJAX call. It won't really, on a desktop with fast internet access, you won't really feel that 1 second because the internet connection is quick and a desktop computer or a laptop has a lot of processor power. But on a mobile device, you'd probably feel that it would make the page feel heavy. So in this case, I'd probably look at potentially updating the theme. So this author box, just if you're the only author on the site, then you just need one author box. So I'd look at maybe a different plugin or updating the theme or some way so it's not an AJAX call on every single page to speed it up. That's kind of outside the scope of things we do because it's it starts getting involved with editing themes and messing around with plugins. So it's kind of, and it's to do with content as well. There is a content benefit to have that author box in there. So those are kind of, they're not, they're outside the scope of what we do because it's kind of to a degree a personal choice with how it looks and what plugins are driving what. But everything else looks okay. From an image perspective, you're really light on images. Let me I'll just load you back up over here, one of the blog posts. So, your blog posts are all pretty light in images. So you see here, you've got 100K of images on this blog post. I'm guessing, let me just clean this up. You don't really have much here. If we load a different blog post, let's just have a look. So this blog page is actually quite sluggish, but my internet is also slow today, so it could be mine. I'll just load up one of these pages. I'll just see if we can find one with some images in it. Okay, so this one might be a good example. So I'm just going to use the inspector tool. That's probably a quick way to do it. We're just going to network and refresh this page. And so you can see here. So okay, so your page there with some images on it, still pretty small at 800k, so I don't think that's really an issue there. This one here has no images. I think broadly you're okay in terms of images. The pages are really light. Quite often blogs like this or sites like this have a lot of images and it makes it pretty heavy, but in your case I think you're okay. There is some advanced image optimization we can do. We use a plugin called Short Pixel. The reason why we use Short Pixel is because it allows us to use WebP file format. There is a blog article on our WP Speedfix site. What's it called? WordPress image optimization. There we go. This explains in a bit more detail why we use Short Pixel and some information about the WebP files. But for you, I don't think that's really an issue because you don't really have huge files, but it would squeeze a little bit more out of the speed. It might make the pages 50 kilobytes less. On a HEP page, it might make it a few hundred KB less. But yeah, I mean, if we were going to do speed optimization for you, we would do probably the big benefits of the WebP images, and then the edge caching, so the site would be faster internationally. Everything else, there's not really much else in terms of speed that you're doing wrong. It's loading really fast in the US. These Ajax queries, probably I'd leave that with you to fiddle with those plugins and find another plugin that you like that does that kind of drives those elements. Probably be mindful of just in the future these third-party codes. They may get slower over time, or sometimes they might be slow. This mail munch, but yeah, I mean, for the most part, the site's running really well already. It's fairly light. This content copy protection stuff that potentially could be an issue in the future, but yeah, for the most part, there's not really that much to optimize. We could probably, if we did the edge caching, this page would be maybe closer to 1 second, maybe slightly under 1 second, depending on what page it is and time of day and a few things like that. But from an ROI perspective, I don't know if it would be worth buying our service. You're already loading pretty fast. I would probably do this Short Pixel thing. You could DIY this, no problems at all, and that would squeeze you a bit extra juice. I don't know. It doesn't look like the site is heavily monetized, so I don't know if it would be worth the ROI of spending on the services. But anyway, that's a very long video. I'll leave you with it. Let me know if you have any questions or if you want to talk through in more detail. Thanks, mate. Cheers.